in Lightfall right now, all primary weapons without investing into AE at all. So whatever the baseline AE is for the weapon, so like 10 to 20 for a hand cannon or whatever, will be as accurate as they were pre-AE with Icarus Grip.
Hey there. The other day we had Bungie's Mercules and Chris Proctor on the podcast I host called Firing Range. They were there to talk about D2 weapon stuff because that's what they work on at Bungie. We were pretty fortunate they came on the show and they dropped a ton of juicy info about the Airborne Effectiveness system, weapon balancing and Lightfall, info about a new exotic coming to D2, a nerf to Revoker, and more. Sorry if you wanted to hear about changes to matchmaking or whatever. Again, reminder, they don't work on that stuff. They work on weapons and that is it. Anyway, the full podcast is even longer and you'll be able to listen to the whole thing over the weekend, but I got the juicy stuff for you right now. Did my best to try and make timestamps and chapters below, so go ahead and skip around to whatever you might want to listen to. Enjoy. Cool guy, do you want to ask any?
Yeah, I'll go.
All right, AE time.
Yeah, so we'll start off and then we'll just build, right? What would you say the overall goal of the AE system was when it was first drawn up, and would you say that goal was achieved? Why or why not?
You want to answer that one, Chris?
Getting into the tough questions. So initially we wanted to balance the increasing number of airborne movement options against their combat effectiveness. We don't actually want Destiny to shift towards an airborne dominant kind of gameplay, like where you spend the majority of your time in airborne engagements. But yeah, we mostly wanted to reduce the number of deaths you'll experience from airborne players who haven't deliberately invested in airborne gunplay. And the system did succeed at that, but ultimately the cost in player fun and sort of how the game feels when you're airborne was way too high. So we're actually going to be pulling that back a bit later.
I don't want anyone at home to think that we are deliberately not walking down that path of following up with, like, what are your plans? Because that is coming down the pipe. They will speak to that. So rest assured, we are not diverting from giving more information. But on the continued discussion about the AE system, let's see, more questions here. Can you walk us through what the overall thought process was in bringing the AE system to the original goal in the game?
As having started from the goal that we just went over, we looked at all of the ways that players currently had to manipulate their effectiveness while in air, either positively or negatively, and wanted to group all of those under a single system that we could just pipe everything through, and ended up deciding on a weapon stat, even though we knew that weapons and abilities and armor would all want to feed into it. A weapon stat still made the most sense. So we started from that. We figured out a bunch of what we would call like sandbox weapon stats, like the stuff that's underneath the investment stats that we wanted to drive off that one stat, which is stuff like airborne accuracy and magnetism cones, like shotgun spread angle and that kind of thing, and just hooked all of those up. Having done that, we decided what we wanted the minimum and maximum effectiveness to be, like at 0 AE and 100 AE, and then figured out what ranges we wanted each weapon type to be able to achieve. So like it's, I don't remember the exact values actually, I don't have them up, but
71 and above is perfect accuracy.
There you go. Yeah, so we wanted it to be easier to achieve that on some weapons than on others, basically. So mostly primaries, it's much easier to get there. Special and heavy weapons, it's harder.
You would be shocked at the amount of times we got this question on Twitter. Some big, great conspiracy, apparently. Was the AE system conceived as a way to basically balance future Lightfall content, i.e. Strand? I think people see the grappling hook and they're like, oh, that's why they put in AE. It's because everyone and their mother is going to be grappling hooking around. So is there any truth to that at all?
Yeah, it's funny how quickly people latched onto that after the Lightfall reveal. Because yeah, that's absolutely true. Like we saw Strand coming, like I don't know, like 9 months ago or something, right? and knew that players were going to spend a lot more of their time airborne come Lightfall than they were earlier, and wanted to make sure that we had the proper levers in place to be able to balance that as needed. You don't want to ship that alongside Strand, because then who knows what will happen, right? Like, it could be a huge mess. We wanted to have this system solid so that it would be ready to just drop Strand into, and everything would hopefully go a lot more smoothly. And like the way we're headed, I think it's going to be really solid by the time Lightfall hits.
What does the most balanced AE system look like in your opinion?
Me, where I'd want it to be balanced is so that high-skilled players don't need to invest particularly heavily into AE. They can land their shots without a whole lot of assistance, and maybe they find it a little harder if they don't like put much effort into it, but they're not super affected by it. And then like players at lower medium skill, something like that, if they build into it, they'll find they become a lot more effective while airborne.
Are there any potential dangers that you're trying to avoid when crafting an AE system that the community is satisfied, or not satisfied with? What would those dangers be, and how are you trying to avoid them?
Yeah, I mean, I think we shipped it fairly conservative because one danger is you build this system, you want players to invest into it, and you're way too generous with sources for the stat off the bat, and everyone just has perfect AE right from day one. And then you might as well not bother at all, right? If everyone can just like get straight there right away. The flip side of that is if you ship a little bit too conservative with it, which I think we probably did, then it's hard for players to build into it, and they can't feel the effects of what it's like to really hit those high points. So yeah, one of those dangers we avoided, and one we hit. Such is life.
Such is life. It's so interesting to me to see pre-Bungie MERC and post-Bungie MERC. Pre-Bungie MERC would have much to say right now. I feel as he just sits there handsomely looking into the webcam. I'm just playing around, buddy.
Shoulders covered up with modesty. Right?
And for the listeners at home, there is no tank top.
No tank top.
It's
my man is
business.
truly reformed. Yeah.
Business professional.
Is it possible to split AE off to just special heavy weapons and leave primaries completely unaffected?
I mean, it's certainly possible. Like we could do anything with it. We could zero it all out if we wanted to. But I think what we're doing in Lightfall, or what's currently in Lightfall, I should say, is basically that. When we get to talk a little bit about the details of that, I think that'll be more obvious. But I think there's an underlying assumption here that I agree with, which is airborne gameplay is much harder to tune for special and heavy weapons, particularly special weapons, since players have those at pretty high uptime. And for primary weapons, it's much less of an issue, because like the one-hit kills from places that you couldn't reasonably see coming are a lot more of an issue than like someone shooting you from off screen, but you have a little bit of time to react because you don't insta-die.
Is that why special weapons are harder to tune in the air, you feel?
Yeah, 100%.
Interesting.
And that's why, so we're doing a big pass over primary weapons, but we want to see how that lands before we do the same thing about special weapons, which I think is likely to happen somewhere a little bit further down the line.
Another question from Twitter. Why not just increase the aim assist and accuracy of grounded target when aiming at airborne targets? This would keep the high-end players happy and use the assistance tool already embedded in the game.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. With the aim assist system as it stands, there's no way to set that up. Is like the technical answer. Like we would need a bunch of engineering to detect whether the thing that you're aiming at is airborne or not, and then like scaling the targets on the on your victim higher when they're airborne or something like that. So it would be quite a lot of work, and I feel like we have pretty good tools to achieve the goals as it stands. But it's a pretty interesting idea. Like I appreciate the creative approaches to like alternatives for what you could do about airborne gameplay here.
In the original TWAB explaining AE, there was a section on subclass options being part of your build. So far, this seems extremely limited to heat rises, Ember of Tempering. Can we expect bonuses added to, say, Whisper of Hedrons or Echo of Domineering?
So firstly, you should probably look at Whisper of Hedrons because that recently got that. It does have an AE bonus when the Whisper of Hedrons perk is active. And yeah, there are more coming in Lightfall. Like there's at least a Strand thing. Is there anything else that we can hint at there, Merc? I think you've dug into the airborne build crafting a bit more.
I mean, I have, but I don't think I'm at liberty to say any of it. I see the red dot dancing across my room, so
MERC is too
there's
new
at least
to take heat. Yeah.
I can't throw myself on the pile like that. I can't sacrifice myself just yet.
That's fair. I will do it, I guess. Yeah, so there is definitely like Strand subclass stuff coming that also lets you build more into AE. And I think post Lightfall, we're going to see revisiting some of the tuning on these because the subclass version of the like weapon armor subclass build for AE is probably a little bit undertuned as it stands. We're working like as a combined sandbox group. We're working on addressing that.
Promise to the listener, we're getting to the part where they're going to, potentially speak on the future of AE, but just maybe two more questions. Any plans to make mobility affect AE? Again, questions from Twitter.
Say plans. It's something that we've talked about though. The problem is that gives it intrinsically gives the class with the most vertical mobility intrinsically the best airborne effectiveness as well, which I think if we were to say disassociate class ability from those stats and put it somewhere else, that would be easy. Obviously mobility is a good place for that to live. I think as it stands, it's a bit dicey though.
Is there a way for the AE system to only kick in when you're at a certain height, i.e. a half meter from the ground? Because at the moment when you're on the ground and hit a weird edge on a map, you all of a sudden feel the AE happen barely off the ground.
Yeah, that really, really sucks, and we are developing something to address it. What we're actually looking at is requiring you to be airborne for a certain amount of time before the game detects you as being airborne. So it's it'll be 0.2 seconds or something, so it won't ever trigger while you're walking down steps.
That's cool.
That is really interesting.
Yeah, another alternative would be instead of time, we do distance, but I think distance is a little bit trickier for players to grok.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
This would also have the benefit of I don't know if this has ever happened to you when you're playing a Nightfall or something, but you're running downstairs and an enemy's shooting you, and occasionally a shot will detect you as airborne and the grounded modifier is active and it just wrecks you.
Nuke you.
So,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It will also fix that. So.
Oh, well. See, what can you share with us about coming changes to the AE system?
Let me see. I'm going to translate a giant pile of numbers into hopefully something that won't get me in trouble.
we don't want that.
We do have in our outline, as broad goals, possible specifics, possible concerns. Don't want y'all getting in trouble.
Yeah,
Merc,
that's true.
Get down, Merc. Down.
Duck and then answer.
Yeah, let me take a crack at it.
Sure.
So firstly, we talked a little bit about goals earlier, and I think one thing that's implied there is that the lack of skill-based matchmaking in the game when we introduced this system, only one mode, 2 modes or something out of a large number, had any sort of skill-based matchmaking. Without skill-based matchmaking, it's more of a problem if high-skilled players and low-skilled players are in the same lobbies. But now that is much less common and we're rolling out skill-based matchmaking more widely, that massively reduces our concerns about that. So it does let us really loosen up how easy it is to build into AE and how the AE system itself is tuned, from 0 to 100. Anyway, so currently we have all this stuff checked in and we're testing it in Lightfall right now. And it's for sure, we're definitely shipping it at the latest in Lightfall. It's possible that we will be confident enough in it after a bunch of playtesting that we will bring it earlier, like the balance update in the middle of season 19 or something like that.
Sure.
So in the event that we don't have concerns about it after a bunch of playtesting, it's likely we'll do that. I'm not promising anything. Don't hurt me. Anyway, so in Lightfall right now, all primary weapons, without investing into AE at all, so whatever the baseline AE is for the weapon, so like 10 to 20 for a hand cannon or whatever, will be as accurate as they were pre-AE with Icarus grip. So, pretend you were like a year ago and you had a hand cannon with Icarus and your shots were going where you put them. Like that's where all primary weapons will be as of Lightfall. That's only part of the equation though. Recently, Cool Guys, Schoolia, right, famously pointed out the difference between accuracy and aim assist and why players are looking at one a bit more than they should be. So yeah, shots going straight is only one part of it. The other part is a lot of Destiny game feel is tied up into the aim assist system, and when we scale that down, the game starts feeling worse, and players can't necessarily identify why that is. But it's not something we're particularly fond of. So we're also going to reduce the auto aim penalties, which is like what community might call bullet bending, where it corrects your bullets towards a target. Be effectively halving those, or slightly more than halving those, which will be particularly noticeable at low AE. And for magnetism, which is what you would call radical friction, which is only on controller,
right.
we're removing those penalties completely. And at high AE, so 60 and above, we're actually giving you a magnetism bonus. So your weapons will be stickier while airborne than they would have been before AE. Yeah, the other thing is the precision aim cone. So we're a little bit more cautious about precision aim cone because that's what lets you get aim assist for crits while airborne, and that's like a little bit more dicey. So we are increasing the maximum precision aim cone you can get to by about 50%, but we're also putting it on an exponential curve. So the more you build into it, the more benefits you get more directly. But if you're still at low to mid AE, you won't get very much assistance with it. So your shots will go straight. You'll have a decent amount of AE. But without really building into it, you'll be getting mostly body shots. For special weapons, we're sort of roughly halving the airborne accuracy penalties for slug shotguns and sniper rifles, and we're removing the accuracy penalties from pellet shotguns completely. To be clear, this is still like you can pretty easily get to Icarus, like pre-AE Icarus levels of accuracy with sniper rifles and shotguns. But even with Icarus, you won't have a landing super long range snipes, or like there was 60% chance you'd miss or whatever, depending on the distance. This makes a pretty big difference for slug shotguns, though. What else have we got? So for pellet shotguns, we felt like the spread angle penalty that you get while airborne is plenty, and we didn't additionally need the accuracy thing. This is actually something that MERC pointed out a while ago, but the fixed spreads are great, and having your reticles show exactly what the spread is going to be is great, but it also really drives home any accuracy, any inaccuracy of the spread when you're airborne, because you've got your reticle right there and the pellet goes somewhere else. I mean, the spread goes somewhere else. So yeah, it makes a lot more sense to lean more on the spread angle and less on the accuracy.
We also have those, which you mentioned, Antoine, before, but like the dynamic spread reticles now in 700. So your shotgun, when you slide or when you jump or anything that affects your spread angle, the reticle itself in hipfire will actually match the spread angle that it changes to. So you can actually tell like how much your spread is being affected when you do any of these things. So you can know how much closer you need to be to a target if your spread is blown out to like secure that kill.
It's a it's pretty complex. I talked about it not too long ago, and just going through those numbers, the quarters, right, 0 to 30, and then all the way up to 71 to 100, to where you get that good accuracy. And the system, like especially when you get high AE, when you jump, the accuracy is 1-to-1. It doesn't move. Whereas before, it would never do that. The only way you could do that was with like Heat Rise's Warlock. And you guys said that you kind of, you know, you ease out the system. What was the word? Kind of not as hot, right? You wanted people to build into it. So you started with some lower stats, but once you do get up there, the Airborne technically is better than it was before. At least that's what I saw with the stuff I was testing. So if you're gonna do all that, it's gonna be a pretty big change to what we have, opposed to what we had a year ago. So
Well,
exciting
there's
stuff.
really like in live before, right? Like if you think of what we had pre AE and you compare it to where we're at now, like before Forsaken, there was only bad in air. Like that was it. That was what you had, right? You jumped in the air, you got your penalties, you really couldn't hit much of anything unless you were spamming stuff. Then in Forsaken, Icarus Grip was added and Heat Rises was added, right? And we ended up with 3 tiers of in-air performance, right? And Icarus was a huge like benefit for a very, very low cost, right? And what it did is it functionally introduced like an equipment skill gap, basically, where like someone who had Icarus on was way more effective than someone who had the same amount of like accuracy in terms of like how good they were at hitting a target in the air, just from like popping on that one little tiny mod, which was relatively low cost. And then Heat Rises was like a whole different ball game where it was like way down the thing. So kind of one of the ways that I was looking at the curve when we were, you know, talking about it was like, okay, well, it would be cool if like more than just Heat Rises Warlocks could get access to that same level of accuracy at the upper end, right? Like Warlocks can do it easier, but other people can also have access to that too. And it would be cool if like we closed the gap between what the base in-air accuracy and what Icarus provided was, right? So like there wasn't this huge gap in between someone who has Icarus equipped and someone who doesn't have Icarus equipped, right? And like those are kind of ways where I started to like line up the accuracy curves on stuff, right? And like Chris said, and like you point out, like we shipped it super conservative because that's the type of thing that like you can't take it back once you've given it out. And the potential downside of shipping it like too hot would have been like catastrophic, right? So we erred on the side of being conservative, knowing that we were going to continue to work on it, knowing that we were going to add more ways to engage with the system, right? Like knowing we were going to do more. And you know, I truly believe, like from having play tested the system, from having used this system, that like the system that we are moving to in Lightfall or potentially sooner is legitimately better than what we had pre-AE. And I know people jumped on me on Twitter being like, yeah, we're going to keep working on it because like I think we can make it better. But legitimately, if we were to go back to the pre-AE system after this, like I feel like it would be a huge regression across the board for in-air gameplay, right? So, you know, I wish we could have done it faster, obviously, but like I really do enjoy this system, and I think it frees me up as a player to like make choices about how I want to engage in the air. And it's like pretty cool as a hunter to be able to get the same access to like Heat Rises level experience as like a Warlock could, right? And I have to try a lot harder, but it's still pretty cool to be able to hit that because prior to that, there was just no way.
That's fair. That's a lot of information to take in, I'll be honest. But it seems like you're feeling good about it. Any closing thoughts on the potential, on the changes coming to the new AE system?
I mean, I'm pretty stoked about the special weapon changes, honestly. Like shotguns losing the accuracy penalty, but slug shotguns and snipers in particular, like functionally the way they're going to work as far as accuracy goes is a lot closer to how primary weapons are working right now in live. So like when you hit around 30, you've got, you know, Icarus level accuracy. When you hit 60 to 70, you know, it's not quite 100% grounded, but it's like closing in on the lower end of grounded accuracy, which is pretty good. And like they're functional and like, you know, based on my experience, and like I'm obviously able to like actually see the cones in game with like a debug and stuff, right? So like I can actually see where the bullet's going to go. Like I think people who are like people who have their aim on point will be able to much more easily get their special weapons to a level where like they can use them effectively too. And if your aim isn't quite so good, then it's going to be a little bit harder because you're going to need some more of the aim assist, right? But like there shouldn't be, you know, this really jarring transition now between like, oh, I'm on the ground and now I'm in the air and my gun feels entirely different. Like that super jarring transition should basically be like mostly gone, right? Like a lot of that was the auto aim and the magnetism stuff, and us walking that back out has made it much smoother to go from grounded gameplay to airborne gameplay and back to grounded gameplay without feeling like your gun just goes wild the second your feet leave the ground. So,
and just like a little bit on the flip side, we did have like goals for AE initially, which we talked over, and having seen the game in retail for like just over 2 seasons and a bunch of internal playtesting, we think that with these changes, we're still hitting those goals, largely because it's still going to be difficult to hit the airborne crits. Like you'll fairly easily, like you'll much more easily get body shots, but if you're not aiming at the head, you'll typically not get the headshot unless you're really built into AE. I'm actually interested in this group's thoughts on how that's likely to feel.
So I wanted to clarify. So Stompies, as an example, pretty much you're almost always going to be at 0, well, at least with what we have right now. So post these kind of changes, like how do you expect that to feel for players? Is that just going to result mainly in like, what does 0 AE look like? Is it like, okay, I'm more accurate than I am now, but I'm mainly hitting body shots? Unless like, I'm like 1000% on the head. Is that like the idea? That's kind of the vibe I got from it, but I don't know.
Yeah,
for sure.
that's the goal. I think like Stompies will typically, as it stands, put you below your starting AE with the weapon, which means you won't quite be at Icarus, but you'll certainly be a lot more accurate than you are now. So if you're doing like typical Stompies things and you're engaging largely at close to medium range, you should be hitting a lot more of your shots, for sure.
Cool.
Very cool. Just really, really going through our podcast outline with a fine-tooth comb here to make sure there is no stone unturned regarding what we wanted to talk about with AE.
Off the rails a little bit.
Oh, God.
Again, I guess a few questions that I thought of is like, was there any, so I know that there's something in the game currently like regarding like your ability jump and how that might affect accuracy. Was there any like thought into like separating that further or not? Or like, as an example, like right now when you 100 jump, I believe your accuracy actually gets a little worse. And then in some of the crosshairs, you can see it reflected where it gets better as you descend. I was just curious on like what the philosophy is with that in relation to the AE system, if you can speak to that.
Yeah, we actually talked a bit about this, like just as a whole sandbox design group. So it's possible that if we feel like we need more finesse over the types of airborne that like give you different types of penalties, we might consider like what an unpowered jump does, like versus a like a fully powered like a triple jump or like a warlock float or whatever. And I can imagine saying, yeah, actually the powered jumps are penalized more heavily or something like that. It's not something that we've discussed to the point where we have a plan of action. Yeah, it's for sure something that's been discussed a bunch.
I mean, now that you mention it, I've never used high jump on Titan. The high lift, whatever it is. So if it could get an AE bonus or something in the future, maybe I'd use it.
Interesting.
You guys didn't
everyone
ask
listening,
about the exotic heavy weapon or exotic heavy sniper AE
All right,
buffs.
what?
You didn't ask about.
Well, I
Whisper
wanted to
Mercy going
make
up to
I wanted to
80
make sure. I mean, hey man, if you want to talk on that, I would love to ask you about it. But I wanted to make sure we had time to talk about all the juicy upcoming changes.
I think those were the juiciest changes. No,
Like that hot 80 Whisper of the Worm.
So, I mean, what we said in the 12 was true, right? Like, we didn't really see any reason for like the heavy snipers to be suffering from inaccuracy in the air, right? Because like they're heavy snipers. So we just massively jumped those things up, and like it wasn't supposed to be a buff like, oh my god, like this is gonna make Whisper meta, right? Like obviously we said in the 12 we have a heavy weapon bounce pass coming in Lightfall. So like this was mostly just supposed to be like a quality of life thing. And like honestly, we had talked about beforehand, like we weren't even gonna put the notes in the 12 at all. Like we were just gonna make those changes, and then people who use them would be like, oh, this is kind of nice. And like maybe someone would do some like trick shots or something in PvP with it, and it would just be funny. But like then when we were doing the TWAB copy, like we just kind of missed editing those things out, and they went out. And as soon as they went out, I was like, oh god. Oh, this is all anyone's gonna talk about. I was guaranteed it. And sure enough, that was a lot. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't supposed to be like this is the hot shit. Like it was just supposed to be like a quality of life thing for those guns, to prep them for,
Oh
And
man.
we just
changes we're
proved
making.
definitively that if you explain the joke, it ruins it.
Yeah.
Well.
So should have just never said anything about it, and someone could have just
Yeah.
made themselves a little montage.
Next TWAB, you have to put like increased aerial effectiveness of swords or something there.
Yeah. We'll start sneaking that line in just once per TWAB.
Is it time for you to potentially tease us about a particular exotic? Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I mean, I'm not even entirely sure like what specifically I'm allowed to say. I mean, I know that there's a bunch of stuff in like in the API already about it, but I know that we've talked a little bit about at least you've seen it, right? You've seen it in the trailer, and you've seen a picture of it on the Bungie website, right? And like there's
Sure.
multiple catalysts and stuff, but yeah, like obviously I did Touch of Malice in the previous season, and that was like my first foray into doing an exotic, but it was a reprise, so like Touch of Malice had already existed, right? So like I really just had to make the change to it to make it shoot the Taken Captain balls. But this was the first time that like I designed an exotic entirely from scratch. Like I got to build it from the ground up, and I got to be like, this is the fantasy that I want for this gun. And I mean, I'm obviously biased, but like this is the gun I'm most excited to use this season in PvP and in PvE. And like I think it turned out just super, super well. I had like a laundry list of really cool things that I wanted to do. And by the freaking grace of the Traveler, they were just like, yeah, okay, like let's do all that stuff. And I just like put everything into this gun, just like a wish list, right? I'm calling it like a test bed, right? Like I did a bunch of really cool stuff to it that hasn't really been done before on an exotic. And then the hard surface artist and the VFX artist and the audio people came through and just like freaking nailed it, man. And like the gun is super, super cool to use. It's super cool to play with. Like the exotic perk, like it's a transformer, dude. And like I think it's the most customizable exotic that we've ever made. Like that, I think that's probably a safe tease. Like I think it learned a lot from like Hawkmoon and DMT and Striga, and like I think it is the most customizable, like make it your own style exotic we've ever had. So,
And man, our artists are wizards. Like I kind of still can't believe that that scope flip thing just looks so natural. So cool.
I was showing them like the actual, in real life versions of those scopes where the scopes like flip up, and I was like, this is what I wanted to do. And they're like, oh, well, we've never really done something like that. Give me like give me a couple days. I'll like whip up a mock-up, and like the first mock-up just like nailed it. I was like, oh, well, like there you go. I was like, you just freaking killed it. So yeah, it's sick.
I don't want to just completely cut. I'm like, Merc, I just want you to know that I'm really proud of you. Like,
I appreciate that,
dude, like how far you've come. Like I remember when we hung out at like one of the first Guardian cons years
GC
ago.
2016.
Dude, like so long ago, and like you came up to me and was like, "Hey, Fallout, man, good to meet you." And like you had your binder. Remember when you went to Guardian Con with a binder of all the printed
Spreadsheets, man.
printed Excel spreadsheets with all weapon and number data on it. And now my man, not only are you working at Bungie, good job, but like just hearing you describe like your first from scratch exotic, I'm really proud of you. This gun better fuck, bro. All right.
No pressure, right? Like no pressure. But it's awesome. Like who wouldn't want to like work on the game that they spend a ton of time playing, right? Like I have like what 3,000 hours in Destiny 2, and like I've put hundreds of hours of my life into podcasts and spreadsheets and articles and stuff, and then to be given the opportunity to like build a gun with all the ideas that I've had for years and years and years. And I talk so much shit on Reddit about like, oh, if I worked at Bungie, I could do this. Right? And basically they like sat me down in front of the, the engine. They're like, all right, well, time to put your money where your mouth is. Like you said, you could do all these things. Let's see if you can knock them out. So it's awesome.
So what can
Every weapons designer comes to Bungie with one exotic and one legendary perk that they were born to make.
Sure, for sure. What can you tell us about it that you won't get in trouble for?
It has origin perks.
Okay.
Wait, on an exotic? That's new.
Yeah.
It has 2 custom build origin perks that I made for it. It's like if a choose your own adventure game was an exotic, right?
I love those.
And it is linked to a foundry. And that's probably all that I can say.
What are you not allowed to tell us?
A lot more. Yeah.
Um,
No, I'm really excited for the 20th. Like
It sounds pretty sweet, man.
It does sound great.
Yeah.
Now
it's good when
technically,
you-
I wrote this in the outline, and no one said that I couldn't ask this question. All right, nobody told me I couldn't ask this, so I'm going to ask it because it's in the outline. Would you say it has a specific role in the sandbox for PvP or PvE?
You can say both.
No, you
so
can't.
the-
Don't give him an answer.
The role in the sandbox for PvP was I wanted to build the weapon that I would want to use most in PvP, right? And I told you I love mini games, so it's got a mini game in it.
Oh.
And I needed something that would be able to compete with the 2 super stacked power crept hand cannons that we introduced in this expansion, right? So like we put Rose and Exalted Truth in there, and those are probably the 2 best hand cannons we've ever made, like legendary wise for PvP. So like I wanted something that would be able to compete with those. Not outclass them, obviously, but like at least be able to go toe to toe. And then for PvE, I wanted it to compete with Arbalest. So
That is a high bar for both.
Yes.
Do you think you've hit that bar?
Based on my experience in playtest, in my hands, yeah, which is hard because like I have more time on the gun than on Earth does. So like, but I think it feels super, super good, and I feel like it's really, really strong. PvE, I don't know. That is a high bar, like you said. I
Pretty
tried.
high, yeah.
I tried, but you can choose one goal and put everything towards it, and then try to hit as can. And like I definitely focused more heavily on like the PvP side of it.
All right.
But it's got one really good catalyst for PvE though. So
I feel like if I ask you any more, DMG will break through the window right to your right.
yeah, he's actually standing like behind me with like a knife, and he's
Off
just like licking the
screen.
blade right now. So yeah.
Right? He's just like,
Damn. Oh man, I wish I could ask you more. Oh well. I mean, it's coming soon, right? I probably can't ask that either.
It's the 20th, right? It's like a week away. So
All right.
hype?
I'm excited, man. That's a lot of build up right there.
Are there plans for more damage-based void perks to keep up with Volt Shot and Incandescent? Because we have volatile rounds, and we just pushed that on the Gerfalcon, which is pretty sweet. But anything in mind for void? Are we keeping Repulsor Brace?
Yes and yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes and yes. Short and sweet. Here's one. The pellet spread changes and per archetype reticle change to shotguns feel really good and well thought out. They really do, by the way. Very, very fun. Matador goes deep right now. Really enjoying the Matador. Any plans to maybe do the same to different types of fusion rifles?
Yeah, so we don't have this tied to a specific release yet, but we're working on a feature that lets us give all weapons deterministic recoil. So you fire an auto rifle and it would recoil in a particular way each time, not just like in a fixed direction, but like a random looking but like predictable pattern. And I saw the question was about fusion rifles, but like this would be potentially for everything. We just have to figure out the details. I wouldn't expect that until like sometime after Lightfall, though. It's a pretty hefty change to like 90% of the weapons in the game. But yeah, it's for sure something that we're looking at and that we're planning to ship at some point.
Any way we can get Hawkmoon and DMT craftable with new perks?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay, I'll elaborate a little bit on that one. I don't need to be quite so mysterious. So it's probably pretty obvious, but Hawkmoon was the prototype for weapon crafting in a pretty serious way. Like we'd always wanted you to be able to customize your exotic weapons. We didn't have a great way to do it before crafting entered the game. So what we had back in season 12 was random rolls. So we put that on Hawkmoon. We put a bunch of cool hand cannon options in there. And then we did the same thing with Dead Man's Tale, and then we stopped. because we figured we got the information we needed, and it felt weird having random rolled exotics, but we think customizable exotics are totally appropriate for specific types of weapons. And yeah, I could for sure. I'm slightly more excited about doing it for Dead Man's Tale, just because Hawkmoon has that RNG kind of as part of its identity, but I don't know, maybe we just have to learn to let that go. In any case, yeah, at some point we expect Hawkmoon and Dead Man's Tale to be craftable.
Why don't you
Not
just
promising a timeline?
I mean, you've already given plenty, but that's pretty great. What if you just tie the RNG to every now and then when you shoot the Hawkmoon, it makes the caw noise, but no extra damage, just a caw.
You monster. Just terrify people in PvP for no reason.
Oh, why not? Yeah.
I have a question. Can we talk about Cloudstrike for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
The catalyst decision for triple tap and plus 25 handling, like, it is perfect. It helps PvE, helps the Crucible, and it looks like, from what I saw, like it's a contender as a special weapon now, like in-game DPS. Really, really good.
There a question in there.
Yeah. So the design, like, what made you go with that?
Yeah. So
We have Stormbringer.
you have Stormbringer. Yeah, like that's the main thing, right? Like, this is a weapon that's entirely built around rewarding precision. But we don't need to reward Cloudstrike's precision anymore in PvP. It's already a monster. Like, its usage reflects that. You come up against a good Cloudstrike user, you should be properly scared, and it changes how you play the game. So we actually didn't want to give it much of a PvP buff. Like, we felt internally like, yeah, it's a little bit sluggish. We don't actually give it quick draw or snapshot or something, but like a bump to its handling is totally safe. And then you have to land 3 shots to proc the storm. Hey, triple tap takes 3 shots, and so you can now like get triple tap on it and get 1 extra storm out of a full magazine. Like, that's it all lined up really nicely. Pretty happy with how that turned out. And yeah, as you point out, like, between getting the catalyst and it now working correctly with Divinity, it's actually a contender for like special ammo at endgame DPS.
Right when I read that in the TWAB that that Cloudstrike was getting that catalyst, I had my phone, I was like texting Cool Guy. I was like, "You reading this shit, bro?"
We're doing the dungeon.
Can we get any info on any exotics getting catalysts or reworks for Lightfall? Take your time on that one.
Yeah, so DMG had the question list. He had his chance to veto this question. He chose not to. Can't fire me. Yeah, so we're doing a big pass on subclass 3.0 verbs on exotic weapons. So there's a whole bunch of changes. Most of them are of that type, though. I'm actually just gonna drop some names. Queenbreaker, Ruinous Effigy, Leviathan's Breath, 1,000 Voices, Sunshot, Polaris Lance, Two-Tailed Fox, Prometheus Lens. And there are a couple of others that we're going to sit on for now. Those are actually the major, like, the exotics that we're touching in kind of a major way, and then there's a handful of other things that we're doing as well.
Fun.
Catalysts.
Huh.
I think we'll just keep the catalyst to ourselves for the moment.
That's fair.
I was actually curious to hear your thoughts, both of you, maybe on the current state of like weapon balancing. I mean, we have the competitive playlist now. Is there anything that stands out at you? I feel like it's been a while since, like, obviously we have the shotgun pellet change. We've had some pretty big changes. Shotgun pellet changes, the DMT changes, and I think I've been noticing a lot of DMT on like PC. Even I think the close range weapons like SMG's got a lot of changes. Sidearms, a lot of back and forth changes. Like, what's your overall sentiment, or like things that stand out at you, or how do you feel about current weapon balancing?
Pretty good.
Yeah, go ahead, Perk.
It's pretty good. I spend a lot of time, like, obviously I play a lot of PvP, and also I spend a lot of time like looking at the analytics and internally, right? And we have stuff like usage and effectiveness and all these things that we look at. And like, I would say that it's pretty good right now. I think shotgun's got a much needed buff with the fixed pellet spread changes. I think they're going to get another one come 700. That's probably going to put them in a pretty good spot. Kind of been languishing a little bit since we reduced the range, which I feel like was necessary because they were choking out pretty much everything else at close range. But I think the consistency is going to be like a big key to them like feeling good to use, even if they don't quite hit at like the 10-meter kills that people were used to with Felwinters and stuff. I think SMGs are in a pretty good space. Shira is still a little hot, but like it's not massively concerning right now. Got an eye on Teraba. Obviously, always have an eye on Teraba. But S sidearms are the buff was a lot. Yeah, the buff was definitely a lot. Like we wanted it to be enough that like especially on mouse and keyboard they would start to feel good to use, right? Like that's been a problem for a long time. They just haven't felt great on mouse and keyboard. And so we wanted to step them up enough to like you could feel the difference on mouse and keyboard and they felt good. I think we're probably going to walk that back just a little bit because they are kind of crowding SMGs at this point in time. People say they're crowding hand cannons. With the exception of Drang, they're not really crowding hand cannons. Like there's a good 10-meter like window that hand cannons have over them unless you're talking 180s. Hand cannons, Rose has helped a lot with hand cannons, right? Like they're both way more effective and way more used now that Rose is like giving everybody stacked rolls every single time they play a comp playlist, which is pretty good. I think the controller meta is probably a little bit more balanced right now than the mouse and keyboard one is. I think DMT is really, really strong on mouse and keyboard. I think No Time to Explain is still really strong on mouse and keyboard. So we're definitely going to look at that type of stuff, and we're going to have to see if we can figure out a way to address the outliers there without like hurting their performance on controller, because neither one of them is really like a super strong outlier on controller. Trying to think what else. LFRs have come down.
To jump in there, yeah. Oh yeah, there's a whole heavy weapon balance pass. For like specifically for PvE stuff. Last note on PvP though, Revoker's time has come.
Wow, that's
let's go.
Okay. Am I allowed? Am I legally allowed to? Oh no, you're talking. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean we're just going to like the only thing that it's really got going for it is reversal of fortune, right? So we're just going to make that perk pay out a lot less. So it'll still have a unique thing, but it can't possibly be the monster that it was. And that's, I think, so I just like to give a little bit of insight into how we do mid-season balance stuff. Paradoxically, when we're doing like massive game-breaking changes like changing how AE works or like rebalancing all of the weapon archetypes, that stuff is really cheap and risky and non-risky to bring into a mid-season thing. But anytime we want to touch a bunch of little individual weapons, that is really hard and expensive just because of how the data is set up. But I think that the Revoker change is one that we would likely bring forward at the same time.
I will point out that DMG in the live chat did say, Proctor, go ahead and tell them. That was a direct quote from DMG.
Oh, there we go. Easy. What was he talking about? Just whatever?
I don't know.
I think he means just the whole Lightfall weapons balance patch.
Oh, well. I just screen share.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's talking about Revoker stuff.
We have some good stuff coming in Lightfall, right? Like there's some underused stuff that's coming up a little bit. There's some stuff that people have been, complaining about for a while that's kind of slipped under the radar that we're just going to preemptively tap down just a tiny amount, right? So it's like not.
He did say Revoker.
He's saying Revoker.
Sorry to interrupt. He did say Revoker.
That's why I didn't say the actual specifics into the other stuff that we're going to
I'm just making sure.
Yeah.
He's freaking out.
But we've done a lot of play testing on a lot of this stuff, and like we feel like it's pretty safe to move in. So I mean, I think weapon balance is pretty good. I'd be interested, obviously, to hear y'all's thoughts, and I'm sure chat has many thoughts about how weapon balance is doing right now.
Sure.
But like, I'm not super unhappy with where a lot of stuff sits. I think auto rifles actually came up a lot. Like, I think auto rifles are pretty heavily slept on right now in terms of effectiveness. Like, they're always going to lag a little bit behind because they can't peak shoot at a high level. But like, especially with a perk like target lock, which makes them like more lethal. Like precision's 450s are like real good right now. So that's kind of interesting. Trace rifles, still not where I want to. They feel better to use now for sure, but like for a special weapon, I feel like they're kind of lagging pretty far behind. So I might investigate poking trace rifles a little bit more.
Fair.
They kill super fast when you actually hit all your shots on target. Like they just evaporate things. I've seen some cool guys' videos, so it's like it's like, and I've used it myself. I love Ruinous Effigy. So
if you can cold heart a second person on the same beam,
that'd be hot.
It's like 30 something to the crit.
Yeah.
So
And-
on those sidearms, Merc, they feel a lot better for M and K. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was in a patch note. Like, sidearms are the only weapons previously that didn't have any aim assist help past fall off.
Yeah, they actually, well, that's not entirely, like the fall off, their aim assist fall off began before damage fall off, right? So they may have still had, small amounts of aim assist vestigial basically. But yeah, they just many moons ago, I guess, before I got there, the decision was made that like sidearms would have like really aggressive auto aim fall off, which is bullet bending, as Chris mentioned earlier, like way more aggressive than any other primary weapon that existed, right? And so all we really did was we just brought them up to match other primary weapons. Like we didn't even buff aim assist past where damage fall off began. We just matched it to where damage fall off begins. And that proved to be like a huge difference maker, especially on stuff that's already like pretty rangy like Drang. So
I don't want to get us too far off the tangent of Revoker.
Yeah, I was just gonna say
It's like I'm still on the edge of my seat here and that.
for real.
I can just drop what the actual change is, since
He gave the word.
DMG is apparently totally fine with it.
He gave the word.
Yeah, but so the trait that it has is reversal of fortune, where when you miss a shot, it's returned to your magazine after a few seconds. The perk is changing to be you have to miss 2 shots within 6 seconds, and then 1 round is returned.
2 shots within 6 seconds.
Sick. That's incredible.
That's better than what we have now.
I always dreamt I'd see it in the power slot, just unchanged, but that's also good.
Yeah, actually, just talking about power slot, like I've seen some comments about Dead Messenger, and we are like giving that a pretty hefty PvP only nerf. Because we're starting to see that surge a bit, and it's pretty oppressive to play against. I just saw some people mentioning that Whisper of the Worm doesn't feel competitive. I just want to say, like, damage-wise, it's already like right at the top. Like it's hard to use, and it's not far enough above the rest. You should see what happens to it when LFRs come down a bit.
Fair.
I feel like Cam had a question about power weapon snipers, and this is, again, feel free to shut it down. Would you ever do like legendary shotgun snipers in the power slot? I mean, like, obviously it's a possibility, but like, do you have any thoughts on it?
I do see that question a fair bit, but yeah, only exotics break the ammo type rules for slots, and that's certainly something that we're sticking to for now. Like, it would actually be cool to have like we have a longbow as a legendary power bow archetype or special ammo archetype or something, but yeah, we reserve breaking ammo rules for exotics. There are a couple of questions that were in the list that I think we could just quickly blast through.
Go ahead.
Will Osmosis work with Strand? Yes, and so will Elemental Capacitor, and Strand's thing is kind of AE, just to tease that a bit. Why was Full Auto Trigger System not removed from Prospector when all of the other exotics that had it as a trait had it removed? The exotic trait for Prospector relies on it being full auto because it spits out a bunch of projectiles and then you release the trigger to detonate. I think we could revisit that, but it would mean redesigning the exotic, which we didn't want to do at the time.
And it did get a perk. It got chain reaction, right?
Or chain reaction as well.
We put chain reaction into the intrinsic instead of replacing like the actual node on the gun. So it did get that swapped out like the other exotics did. We just didn't actually pull the perk node off of it.
Yeah. How do you guys decide which weapons should be craftable or not? Typically, weapons that are in the that are seasonal weapons are completely fair game. We tend not to do end game weapon sources as craftable, with the exception of raids. So we don't intend to have craftable trials or dungeon weapons. The menagerie things were kind of a special case because they were split across the 2 sources. We didn't want to break up the set by along crafting lines. But we've hinted a little bit at like what's going to happen to adept raid weapons. Like they will get some sort of access to enhanced traits, and we might start rolling that out across more widely across endgame weapons as well. Last one, which I could just hit quickly, was just a fun one. How would an international student or graduate go about applying for Bungie jobs, and what has been your experience as an Australian working in the US? For games jobs generally, if you're a games student of any kind, I would highly recommend that you work on projects outside of your schoolwork, because any recruiter or any hiring manager will look at you compared to other applicants, and the people who have clearly the most passion for game development are the ones who will get further. So we look at personal projects and stuff a lot. The other thing is, like, specifically for international students, this really sucks, but you kind of have to have a four-year degree, because most countries won't give you a work visa unless you do. So that's a bummer. Australian working in the US, this is a really, really weird country after Australia.
Again, full version of that podcast will be up over the weekend. It is called DCP Firing Range. Leave me a comment below. And if you want a live chat about anything mentioned, swing by my Twitch channel. I'll be happy to talk to you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.